In this series, we're going to create a music player with 3 different interactive timelines. We can of course drag and drop our music file, we have our play and pause button and our volume slider as well. And this is our first interactive timeline where the time smoothly rotates as we drag along. Our second timeline is this static waveform that displays the song's loud and silent parts. And our third timeline is this dynamic waveform that only displays the area you scroll to. In this first video, we will only create this static version, so we've still got our play pause button and our volume, but the text is static. In this second video, we will create a rotating timeline, and in the third video, we will be creating both waveform timelines. If this video gets 100 likes, I will release the second video for free, but the third one will only be on our website graphfix.net for a very cheap price. But now let's start coding. So we will start off with an element abbreviation, which will add the basic HTML elements for our site, and then we will link our style sheet and our script. Remember to add a defer to our script, and what I do next is create the files by control and clicking, which is a shortcut in Visual Studio Code. The first thing we will add to our body is an audio tag, and to make the tag visible we will write controls, and as you can see, if we reload our page we get this pre-made audio player. Next we will style our audio tag, and we will give it an opacity of 0.5 and a position of absolute, which will make it more subtle and it will avoid interfering with our layout. Next we will add a div with the class container, and then inside we will add a div with the class album, and then inside that we will add an input of type file. Next we will make it so the input only accepts audio files by doing accept and passing in audio / the asterisk symbol, and we will also add a class of file input. And now it looks like so. Next we will go to our CSS and we will select the HTML tag, and we will give it a box sizing of border box. Then using the asterisk symbol and the before and after attributes, which selects everything, we will set box sizing to inherit, margin to 0 and padding to 0. And as you can see, now our elements have no additional default padding. Next we will select our body tag and we will give it a height of 100 viewport height, a display of grid, a place content of center. Then for font family I will choose the Verdana shortcut. Then I will set font weight to bolder, and I will also set touch action to none. Then we will select our container div and we will set the background to #FDD. Then we will give it a width of the minimum value between 95 viewport width and 80 viewport height, and then we will give it an aspect ratio of 1. And now it looks like so. We will also add a position relative to the container, and basically what the width value does is it switches to the smaller value between the two, as you can see here. Next we will select our album div and we will give it a margin of 0 auto, a width of 40%, an aspect ratio of 1, a border with the minimum values between 1.1875 viewport width and 1 viewport height. The border will be solid with a color of #000, and lastly we will add a border radius with the minimum values between 4.75 viewport width and 4 viewport height. And now as you can see, if we resize our page, the border thickness and the border radius change respectively to the container width. Next we will select our file input and we will set it to have a width of 100%, a height of 100%, an opacity of 0 and a cursor of pointer. And now we can select the song by clicking inside the album or by simply dragging and dropping, but right now if we select the song, nothing happens. So to make it do something, we will go to our JavaScript and we will select our file input by doing document.querySelector and passing in its class, and we will also select our audio tag by using document.querySelector again, and we will pass in the tag instead. So we will add an event listener to our file input and we will listen for the change event. We will then pass in the event to our arrow function, and we will create a constant file is equal to the event target of files, and we will select the first file. And if the file is falsy, then we will return nothing, so the function stops running, but if the file is not falsy, then the function will continue to run and we will console log out our file. You can see we get an object with values like its name, the size of the file, the type of the file, and more. Next we will create a constant file URL, which we will set to url.createObjectURL, and we will pass in our file. And now what we can do is set our audio source to the file URL we just created, and if we select our song, you can see that now we can use the controls of our audio tag. Next, we will go to our HTML and we will add a new div with the class timeline after our album, and inside we will add a div with the class current time, and we will write inside it 0:00, and then we will duplicate the div and change the class to total time. Then in between the divs we will add an SVG with the class line. You can also copy the SVG from our website graphfix.net under the assets section of the series. Nonetheless, we will add a VBox with a value of -2, 0, 104, 10, and then we will set the XML and S to the w3.org website. Then inside we will create a path with the class line path, and we will set D for data to M05, L45, C45, 5, 45 -1, 50 -1, C55 -1, 55, 5, 65, and L105. Then we will set the fill to none, we will set the stroke to #000, then we will set the stroke width to 1.8, and lastly we will set the stroke line cap to round. Then below we will add an ellipse with the class line ellipse, and we will give it a horizontal radius Rx of 2, and we will give it a horizontal position Cx of 50, a vertical position Cy of -1, and the fill of #000. And now it looks like so. Next we will go after our total time div, and we will create an input of type range, and we will give it a class of input range, and we will give it a minimum value of 0, a maximum value of 1000, and a default value of 0. And now it looks like so. Next we will go to our CSS and we will select the timeline div, and we will give it a display of flex, a width of 80%, and a height of 10%. And as you can see, now they're displayed in a single row. Next we will also set align items to center and justify content to space between, and now it looks like this. Next we will give it a margin of 1% at the top, auto on the right, 2% on the bottom, and auto on the left, and this will center the timeline div. Next we will also give it a position of relative, so we can use position absolute for the elements inside the timeline. Next we will select our line SVG and we will set its height to 100%, and you can see now that it's not cropped anymore. Next we will select our input range and we will give it an opacity of 0.4 and a height of 60%. Giving it the height will give us more room to click the input, as you can see when we inspect the element. Next we will select both the line SVG and the input range, and we will give them a position of absolute, a top of 50%, a left of 50%, and a translate of -50%, -50% to center them both. And then we will give it a width of 80%, and now it looks like this. As you can see, the input and SVG are now aligned. Next we will go to our HTML and we will create a new div between the album and the timeline divs, and we will give it a class of display time. Then inside we will add a div with the class DT_blob container, and then inside that we will add a div with the class DT_blob, and then inside that we will add a div with the class DT_blob time, and we will write 0:00 inside. Next we will select the display time div, and we will give it a width of 62%, a height of 3 rem, a margin of 0 auto to center it, but we will then add a margin top of 4%, then we will give it a position of relative and a solid border of 1 pixel with the color #000. And now it looks like so. Next we will select the DT_blob container, and we will give it a width of 100% and a height of 100%. Next we will select our DT_blob div, and we will give it a background color of #000, a padding of 0.1 rem, a color of #FFF, a height of 100%, a font size of 1.35 rem, and a border radius of 100 rem. And now it should look like this. Next we will give it a position of absolute, we will set left to 0 and top to 0, then we will give it a translate of -50%, 0, and now it should look like so. And now we just need to center our text, so we will select DT_blob time and we will give it a height of 100%, a display of grid, and a place content of center. So now it looks like this, and the next thing we will work on is adding the play and pause button. So we will go to our HTML and we will collapse these divs, and we will add our play pause div under our timeline div. And then inside it, we will add an input of type checkbox, and then we will give it a class play pause input. Then we will add an SVG, and we will give it a class of play pause SVG, a viewbox of 0, 0, 151, 151, a fill of none, and for the XML and S, we will add the w3.org website. And instead of writing the paths and groups inside the SVG, I will just paste them in. Again, you can copy everything from our website under the assets section, and as you can see, now we have this. Next we will go to our CSS to style the SVG, so we will select our play pause div, and we will give it a width of 9%, a margin of 0 auto to center it, a position of relative, an aspect ratio of 1, and now it should look like this. We will also add a display grid to it, and now it should center the input and the SVG. Next, we will select our checkbox through its class play pause input, and we will give it a position of absolute, an inset of 0, and an opacity of 0.5. Next, we have to make the play and pause buttons disappear depending if the checkbox is ticked or not, so we will select play pause input, and if it's checked, then we will use the tilde symbol to select a following sibling, and we will select the play pause SVG, and we will then select the pause lines inside it, and we will give it an opacity of 1. We will duplicate those lines, and we will change pause lines to play icon, and we will set its opacity to 0, and then we will just copy the pause line section at the top, and we will set its opacity value to 0 as default. And as you can see now, when we tick and untick the checkbox, the SVG changes. Next, we will set the input's opacity to 0, and then we will select both the pause lines and the play icon, and we will make them transition the opacity value for 0.3 seconds, and we will give it the easing of cubic Bezier with the values of 0.1001. And now, as you can see, the icon transitions when we click. Next, we will go to our HTML, we will collapse the play pause div, and now we will add the volume section after it. So we will start off by adding a div with a class volume container, and inside we will add a div with a class volume div, and then inside that we will add a div with a class volume BG for background. Then after that we will add a div with a class volume overlay, and after that an input of type range. And we will give the input a class of volume input, then we will give it a minimum of 0, a maximum of 100. We will set its default value to 100, and now it looks like this. Next, we will go to our CSS to style it, so we will select the volume container, and we will give it a width of the maximum value between 15% and 6 rem. Then we will give it an aspect ratio of 2.5, then a margin of 1% auto, a solid outline of 1 pixel with the color hashtag 000. Then we will give it a display of flex. We will set justify content to center and align items to center. And now it looks like so. Next, we will select volume div, and we will give it a width of 20%, a height of 20%, and for transition, I'm going to select the bottom option Visual Studio Code gives us, which is a cubic Bezier with the values 0.231, 0.321, and then we will transition the width property for 0.3 seconds. We will also give it a position of relative. Next, we will select both volume BG and volume overlay, and we will give them a width of 100%, a height of 100%, and a border radius of 20 rem. Next, we will select volume BG by itself, and we will give it a background color of RGBA, and we will make it black by doing a 000 for red, green, and blue, and then we will give it an alpha or an opacity of 0.3, and now it looks like so. Next, we will select volume overlay, and we will copy the background color from volume BG, and as you can see, if we reload the page, the overlay is not stacked on top of volume BG, so we will give volume overlay a position of absolute, a left of 0, a top of 0, a width of 100%, and a height of 100%. And now you can see that they're stacked on top of each other. Next, we will change the alpha to 0.6, and for transition, we will again use the bottom option, and we will transition the opacity property for 0.3 seconds, and we will then set the opacity to 0, and now it looks like so. Next, we will select the volume container, and if it's hovered, we will select volume div, and we will give it a width of 90%. We will then copy all of that, and we will change volume div to volume overlay, and then we will switch width 90% to opacity, and we will set it to 1, and now we have this smooth transition when we hover. Next, we will select the volume input, and we will give it a position of absolute, a top of 50%, a left of 50%, a translate of -50%, -50%, a width of 110%, a height of 120%, and an opacity of 0.5 for now. So this is what it looks like now. You can see that we can hover and use the input range, and now that we've seen it works, we can set its opacity back to 0. And we're pretty much done with the styling, so now we just have to make everything work, and we will go to our JavaScript for that. We will remove the console log as we don't need it anymore, and then we will add an event listener to the audio, and we will listen for the loaded metadata event, which will listen for when the file is loaded, and inside the arrow function we will console log out the audio's duration, the audio duration divided by 60, and the audio duration mod 60. So if we reload the page and choose our audio file, we first get the amount of seconds of the audio, which is 174.5, then we get the amount of seconds divided by 60, which gives us 2.9, and then the duration mod 60 gives us the remainder of the division operation, so 54.5 seconds. Next, we will select the input range by using document.query selector and selecting the input range class. Then we will add an event listener to the input range, and we will listen for the input event, and we will pass in the event inside the arrow function. Then we will check if the audio duration is falsy, and if so, we return nothing, so the rest of the code coming up stops running. So as you can see, if we scrub through the input range, nothing gets consoled out because we didn't select any file, but if we do select one, you can see that it does log it out. Next, what we will do is set the audio current time to the input range value, and to give it the correct value, we will have to do input range.value divided by 1000 multiplied by the audio duration, and now we will console log out audio.current time to see what we get. And as you can see, if we select our file and we scrub around, we will get the amount of seconds depending on where the input range is selected. We will then use all these values to replace the static 0:00 values we have. Next, we will select the current time element by using document.query selector, and by passing in its class, we will then duplicate that line and change it to the total time element, and then we will duplicate that once more and we will change it to the dt blob time element. Next, we will go inside the input range event listener and we will set the current times inner text to the string interpolation of the current minute, which is equal to the math.trunc of audio.currenttime divided by 60. We will then add a colon outside the string interpolation, and after it we will add a second string interpolation that will represent the second, so we will do math.trunc and we will truncate audio.currenttime mod 60. And as you can see, it works. However, there's one issue, and that's when the modulation returns a value below 10. As you can see, it doesn't return the number with a 0 in front. So we will check with an if statement to see if the math.trunc of audio.currenttime mod 60 is below 10, then we will take the currenttime.inner text line and simply add 0 after the colon. We will then write an else if statement and we will check if the math.trunc of audio.currenttime mod 60 is equal or above 10, and then we will take the currenttime.inner text line and remove the 0. And now you can see that it works. First, we will remove the console.log and then we will duplicate these lines and we will change current time to dt blob time, so now it works for both elements, as you can see. We will then copy all of this and we will paste it inside the loaded metadata event listener for our audio. Then we will change current time to total time, and instead of using audio.currenttime, we will be using audio.duration, and now when we select the song, total time will also work. Next, we will go above the loaded metadata event listener for our audio and we will work on the play pause button. So we will select our play pause input by using document.query selector and by passing in its class, and then we will create a variable playing interval. Next, we will add an event listener to our play pause input and we will listen for the change event, and inside the arrow function we will make a check, and if there is no audio duration, then we will simply return nothing, so the rest of the code stops from running. Then we will write an if statement if the play pause input checkbox is checked, and if true, then we will play the audio, and then we will write an else if statement, and if the play pause input is not checked, then we will pause the audio, and as you can see, it works. Next, we will go inside the checked if statement and we will set playing interval to be equal to set interval, and we will set it to run every 1000 milliseconds, and we will set the input range.value to be equal to the audio.currenttime divided by audio.duration multiplied by 1000. Then we will go inside the unchecked if statement and we will use the clear interval on our playing interval, and we will also set playing interval to null. And as you can see, when we play the song, the input range gets updated. Next, we also want to update the current time, so we will go to the bottom of our script and we will create a function called update current blob time, because we want to update both the current and dt blob time. So we will cut and paste the if statements inside the function, and then we will run the function inside the input event listener and inside the interval, and now when we play the song, the time should update. Next, we will clean up the code by removing some console logs that we don't need, and next we will work on our volume. So we will go at the bottom and we will select our volume input by using document.query selector, and we will pass in its class, and then we will do the same with volume overlay. Next, we will add an event listener to our volume input and we will listen for the input event, and inside the arrow function we will set the audio's volume to the volume input.value divided by 100, because the audio.volume uses values between 1 and 0. And now you can see that it works, but there's nothing visual that determines that the volume is changing. So to create a visual change, we will use clippath on our overlay. So we will do volume overlay.style.clippath, and we will use a polygon, and we will do 0, 0 for the top left corner, 100% 0 for the top right, 100% 100% for the bottom right, and 0 100% for the bottom left. And as you can see, it looks the same. However, when we use 50% instead of 100 on our X values, you can see that's cut in half. So all we have to do now is copy that line, paste it inside the input event listener, and we will use string interpolation for the X values, and we will use volume input.value, and now you can see that it works. And as you can see, it also mutes the audio player from up here. Next we will work on our DT blob, so we will go to our CSS and we will set its transform origin to bottom center. We will give it a rotate of -25 degrees and a scale of 0. We will then transition the scale property for 0.3 seconds and we will give it an easing of ease with a 0.15 seconds delay, and we will also transition rotate with the same values. And as you can see, when we reload, it disappears. So next we will create a quick check to see if it works by selecting DT blob container, and if it's hovered, we select DT blob and we will set its scale to 1 and its rotate to 0 degrees. And as you can see, we get this animation. However, we want this animation when we click on the input, so we will remove this as we don't need it, and we will also comment out the rotate and the scale for now so we can see DT blob when we reload the page. We will also translate the DT blob container along the input. We could be using the left property on DT blob to move it around, but the translate property is faster. So we will select DT blob container by using document.query selector and by passing in its class, and then we will go inside the input range event listener and we will do DT blob container.style.translate, and we will set it to the string interpolation of input range.value divided by 10, and then outside it we will add the percentage symbol and 0. And now you can see that it works. Next we will go to our CSS and we will transition the translate property of our DT blob container for 0.4 seconds, and we will give it an easing of cubic Bezier with the values 0001. And as you can see, it's a bit smoother now. Next we will go to our DT blob and we will uncomment the scale and rotate properties, and then we will go to our JavaScript and we will select DT blob by using document.query selector and by passing in its class. Then we will go inside the input range event listener and we will set dtblob.style.rotate to 0 degrees, and we will set dtblob.style.scale to 1, and as you can see, when we click on the input it pops up. However, it stays there even after we are done. So to fix that, we will add a new event listener to our input range and we will listen for the pointer down event, which is when we click on it, and then we will copy it and change the event to pointer up, which is when we stop clicking. So we will copy the scale and rotate styles of DT blob that we've set and we will paste them inside the pointer up event listener, and we will change scale to 0 and rotate to -25 degrees, and now you can see that it appears and disappears. However, if we click and the input doesn't change, then DT blob doesn't appear anymore. So to fix this, we will simply paste the scale and rotate styles from the input event listener to the pointer down event listener, and now you can see that it works. However, you might get these scroll bars. So to fix this, we will go to our CSS up to our container element and we will give it an overflow of hidden, and now it should work. Next, we also want to run the update current blob time function inside the pointer down event, and now if we choose a song and we play it, one of the issues is that it keeps playing while we scrub and even after we've stopped at a certain point. So to fix that, we will go to our pointer down event listener for our input range and we will write audio.pause, and we will also add clear interval and we will pass in playing interval, and then we will set playing interval to null. And now as you can see, when we drag around, the music stops. However, when we let go, we want the music to play, but it doesn't. The reason we want it to play is because we've just scrubbed around and the play pause button is showing that it's currently playing. So to fix this, we will go to our pointer up event listener and we will check if play pause input is checked, and if it is, then we will play the audio, and we will also go to where we've set the playing interval to a set interval. We will copy it and paste it inside the if statement we just made. And we're pretty much done. We just have to make this feature work. So to do that, we will go above our input range event listener and we will declare some variables. So we will do let path height is equal to 5, we will do let x width is equal to 10, we will set bottom coordinate to 5 and top coordinate to 5 as well. And then we will select line path by using document.query selector and by passing in its class, and then we will do the same with line ellipse. Lastly, we will declare input percentage and we will set its default value to 0. Then we will go inside the input event listener and we will do linePath.set attribute and we will set the D attribute for draw, and we will go back to our HTML and we will copy its value and then we will paste it back in our JavaScript. We will then set input percentage to be equal to input range.value divided by 10, and now using string interpolation, 50 will become the input percentage and we will change the other numbers accordingly. So 55 will be input percentage plus 5, so we will do that for both of these values. Then we will set 60 to be input percentage plus 10, and then we will do the same with 45, so input percentage minus 5, and lastly for 40 we will do input percentage minus 10, and as you can see, when we reload we get this at the moment. Next, instead of using these numbers, we will use the variables we've just created for even more customization. So instead of using 10, we will use x width at the start and here at the end. And then before this coordinate, we have the bottom side of the curve. So we will be doing input percentage plus bottom chord. And then on the next coordinate, we have the top side. So we use top coordinate. And then again, we have top coordinate. And then lastly, we have bottom coordinate. And as you can see, it looks the same. However, what we can do now is change the bottom coordinate to something like 2 and we get a slightly different shape. And we can do the same with top coordinate and you can play around with more values, but I'm just going to keep it at 5. Next, I'm going to go to the -1y values, which creates the raised part of the SVG by moving the coordinates up, and I'm going to replace them with path height through string interpolation. And as you can see, now when we click, the raised part is gone. So to fix this, we will go inside the input event listener and we will set path height to -1. We will copy that and paste it inside the pointer down event listener, and then we will copy that and paste it inside the pointer up event listener. However, we will set path height to be 5 inside pointer up. And the reason why this doesn't work is because we also have to set the line path attribute, so I'm just going to copy it inside the pointer up event listener for now, and as you can see, it works. However, I'm going to remove that line and we will copy and remove the input percentage and the set attribute lines. We will then go down here to our functions and we will create a new one called set path, and we will paste the code in here. We will then go after each one of the path heights we've set and we will run our set path function, and as you can see, now it works. Next, we need to fix the fact that the x coordinates go below 0 or above 100, and we will start with below 0. So we will do if input percentage minus x width is smaller than 0, then we will copy the line from above and we will set the line x coordinate to 0, and now it looks like this. Next, we will go to the first cubic x coordinate, which is set to the input percentage minus bottom coordinate, and we will multiply it by input percentage divided by x width. We will then take this multiplication and we will add it to the next x coordinate right after the input percentage minus top coordinate, and now we will get this straight line when we reach the end. Next, we will gradually move the bottom coordinates of the line up, so we will go to the first coordinate m and we will replace the y coordinate 5 with a string interpolation, and we will do 5 minus 6 and we will multiply 6 by x width minus input percentage, and we will divide this subtraction by x width. We will then copy that and we will replace the y coordinate of the next 2 points with what we copied, and now it looks like this. Next, we will make it so the ellipse moves along, so we will do line ellipse dot set attribute and we will set cx to input percentage, and now it looks like so. So now that we're done with the left side, we will work on the right side. So we will copy the if statement and we will change it so it checks if it's above 100, and then we will do plus x width instead. We will then remove the line inside and we will use the top line path dot set attribute instead, and we will go right after the center coordinate, which is the input percentage for x and path height for y. So the next coordinate is input percentage plus top chord, and we will multiply it by 100 minus input percentage in parentheses, and then we will divide that by x width, and then we will do the same to the next x coordinate, and then for the next one we will change it to 100. And as you can see, now we get the straight line, so all we have to do now is gradually move the bottom line up, and we will do so by replacing the y coordinate 5 with a string interpolation, and inside we will do 5 minus 6 times 1 minus parentheses 100 minus input percentage, and we will add parentheses around them again, and we will divide it by x width. And now we will copy this and we will paste it for the other 2 y coordinates, and now it should look like this. However, there's still one more issue, and that is the fact that when we let go at the end, it stays up like this. So to fix this, we will simply copy our function and we will change it to set path flow, and now all we will do is change the edited y values to 5. So now we will go to our pointer up event listener and we will change set path to set path low, and now everything works except for the line ellipse, which stays stuck at the top. So to fix that, we will go to our setPath function and we will copy the line ellipse set attribute line. We will then paste it inside the pointer up event listener. We will change cx to cy and we will change input percentage to 5. We will then copy and paste that line inside the pointer down event listener, but this time we will change 5 to -1, and then we will copy this and paste it inside the input event listener as well. And as you can see, it works pretty well, but there's no transition between the clicks. So first we will go to our pointer down event listener and we will write linePath.style.transition, and we will make a transition the D property for 0.2 seconds with an easing of ease. We will then duplicate that, change linePath to line ellipse. We will change the transition property to CX instead. We will then copy the whole transition value, add a comma, then paste, and then we will change CX to CY, and now both values will transition. We will then go to our HTML and I will change the default path to be at the bottom, so I will set all these -1s to 5 and then I will do the same with the ellipse CY value. And as you can see, it works. However, there's one issue, and that is the fact that when we drag around, the SVG just becomes very sluggish. It's slower than the display time above, as you can see. So to fix that, we will go to our pointer down event listener after the transition lines, and we will do input range.add event listener, and we will listen for the pointer move event, and we will run the input range transition function. Then we will go down to our functions and we will create the input range transition function, and all we will do is copy the transition lines from above, paste them inside, and then we will assign both transition values to none. And as you can see, it transitions when we pointer down, and as soon as we move around, it now follows our cursor with no delay. However, this means that when we move around, we will have no transition after. So to fix this, we will go to our pointer move add event listener, we will copy and paste inside the pointer up event listener, and then we will change add to remove. We will then copy the transition lines above and we will paste it after we remove the event listener. Then we will also go above and paste them where we've declared our variables, so it transitions by default. Next, we will go to each of our playing intervals and we will run our setPathLow function, and this will update the SVG when the song plays. Now, as you can see, everything kind of works. However, there's actually one thing that doesn't, and that's when we continuously pointer down, you can see that the display time blob doesn't get updated. So to fix this, we will go to our input range input event listener, and we will copy the first line, which is where we translate DT blob container, and we would simply paste it inside the pointer down event listener. And as you can see, now it works. Next, we will go to our HTML and I will set the default CX to 0 and the audio element opacity to 0. Then I will go to our CSS and I will comment out the background from our container. I will then go to the input range and I will change the opacity to 0. Then I will go to display time and I will change the border color to transparent. And lastly, I will comment out the outline from volume container. And now it looks like this, and the next thing we're going to do is create some media queries, because as you can see, when we change the viewport width to something like this, it becomes kind of unusable. So we're going to go to the bottom of our CSS and we will write add media parentheses, and inside we will check if the aspect ratio is smaller than 2 divided by 3, and if so, then we will select our body and we will give it a background of red. And as you can see now, when we resize and the aspect ratio reaches below 2 divided by 3, the background turns red, and what I want to change in this area is just the size of DT blob. I think it's a bit too large compared to the rest. So we're going to select display time and we will give it a height of 2.6 rem. We will then select DT blob and we will give it a font size of 1.25 rem. We will then take the whole media query and we will duplicate it below, and we will change it to check if the aspect ratio is smaller than 1 divided by 2. We will uncomment the background and we will change it to display the color green yellow instead, and so an aspect ratio of 1/2 looks something like this. So for this media query, I will change the height of display time to 2.4 rem, then I will select the timeline and I will give it a width of 100% and the height of 12.5%, so it's easier to select the timeline. I will change the DT blob font size to 1.1 rem, and I will add display time a width of 79.5%, and obviously we will also comment out the background from our body. And now it looks like this. So this is it with no media queries. Then this is it when we reach the aspect ratio of 2/3. And then this is it when we reach the aspect ratio of 1/2. And so we're pretty much done. We can play songs, we can change the volume when we scrub around the timeline, the SVG and DT blob update, and the song pauses. And so this is it. Well done for making it this far. And as always, let me know what I should do next.